This is the Winter Economic Report from Resch Marketing. This report is made possible by support from Clark's Termite and Pest Control, now providing builder support through their Marketing Assistance Program. Visit clarkspest.com and click on Commercial Services.
Lead, follow, or get out of the way. That's what the economic indicators are saying. Now is the time to be proactive in response to a recovering economy. The numbers are clear. Those who are not proactively planning for the improving economy will either be pushed aside or required to play a perpetual game of catch-up. Despite getting off to a slow start in 2013 due to the payroll tax increase and federal sequester, South Carolina's economy picked up steam in the second half of 2013. The annual rate of employment growth, the best gauge for statewide economic activity, increased from 1.5% between January and June to 1.9% between July and November. In addition, there are several regions of South Carolina that have now achieved total employment levels not seen since before the Great Recession. This figure highlights the 10 counties in South Carolina that have employment totals that are higher today than they were in 2007. Among the three major metropolitan regions, Charleston's current employment level is approximately 5.1% higher than it was in 2007. Greenville's is 0.2% higher, and Columbia's is 0.09% lower. This is consistent with the fact that of the major markets in South Carolina, Charleston has been steadily growing at the fastest rate. Perhaps the most encouraging news regarding this improvement in employment growth is the fact that the construction industry has been the major contributor to this trend. This figure highlights the major industries in South Carolina and how wages and employment levels have grown in each over the past 12 months. Each bubble represents a specific industry, and the size of each bubble represents that particular industry's total size. Notice that while the construction industry is not the largest in terms of sheer size, it has been the overwhelming leader in employment growth over the last 12 months at 6.1%. This is more than twice the rate of any other major industry in South Carolina. Further, the construction industry is contributing to wage growth in South Carolina, as the average construction job in South Carolina pays approximately 9% above the state average. So what areas of construction are contributing most to this high growth? As this figure shows, the growth in construction over the past 12 months has come primarily from specialty trade contractors. Specialty trade contractors, that is, subcontractors, consist of establishments involved in all types of building construction, but are not responsible for the entire project. By contrast, builder establishments and employees are typically categorized under construction of buildings. Thus, while the number of subcontractors is expanding, the number of builders is not. This implies at least two things about today's housing market. First, there is still a large amount of underutilized resources in the housing market. In other words, existing builders are not operating at full capacity. Thus, it's possible for the recent increase in housing demand to be entirely fulfilled without the need for a significant number of new builders in South Carolina. Second, it is likely that a large portion of the increase in construction employment is due to an increase in remodeling demand. In addition to this being positive news for the housing industry, it is a positive sign that consumer demand is on the rise in general, which implies greater economic stability. South Carolina new home sales continue their upward climb. This figure illustrates the year-over-year growth rate of housing sales from the second quarter of 2010 to the third quarter of 2013. Notice the two distinct patterns in the data, which is delineated by the dotted line. The period from the second quarter in 2010 to the fourth quarter in 2011 saw a major swing in housing activity because of the new homebuyer tax credit. In the immediate aftermath of the expiration of the tax credit in the second quarter of 2010, housing sales dropped, thus making year-over-year comparisons negative. As sales activity began to pick up again in the early part of 2011, the growth rate was initially very high, but eventually settled into a steady pace, which can be observed beginning in the second quarter of 2012. On the whole, new home sales have increased by 20.3% between the third quarter of 2012 and the third quarter of 2013 across all three metropolitan areas. Continued house price appreciation is another positive sign for housing markets in South Carolina, though the Columbia market is still struggling behind Greenville and Charleston. This figure visually places the Greenville, Columbia, and Charleston FHFA house price indices over the index for South Carolina. It's clear that the Charleston and Greenville markets are setting the positive state trends, while Columbia is still hovering close to zero. Because the highest levels of economic growth in the state are occurring in Greenville and Charleston, the highest levels of housing demand, and therefore price appreciation, are also occurring in those regions. So how do we sum up what to expect for 2014 in South Carolina? If most of the indicators are positive, then why are there so many negative feelings regarding our current economic climate? The answer lies in this figure. Here we see the annual rate of employment growth graphed for two periods, 2004 to 2007 and 2010 to 2013. Notice that when the trend lines are plotted across both periods, the trend line for 2010 to 2013 is steeper. This means that our rate of employment growth over the last 3 years, our best measure for overall economic activity, is increasing faster than it was during the housing boom. Before the recession, we were, metaphorically, climbing a staircase one step at a time and had progressed to the third floor. The recession effectively knocked us back to the basement, but we're moving upward again 2 steps at a time. The reason many don't feel the recovery isn't because of the pace of the rate of growth, which is better now than before the recession, that is, 2 steps at a time instead of 1. The reason many don't feel the recovery is because we were knocked back to the basement, and despite our gains, we have yet to reach the third floor again.
This economic report was made possible by Clark's Termite and Pest Control, offering environmentally conscious options in pest control services. Click on Eco Select at clarkspest.com.